Welcome back, everybody, to Command Combat Battle Reports. And we're continuing our game of Axis and Allies World War I. It is the year 1917, or thereabout. In Axis and Allies terms, time is a little bit relative. But we've been playing out the whole war, each country has a player, and it's been really going back and forth. Last year, it looked like it was going to be an Entente victory at the beginning of the year, and by the end of the year, the Central Powers were really taking control. The Ottoman Empire is pushing down into Africa, the Austrians are pushing into Italy, and Germany is butting up against France and Britain. The US is coming in from the west, and Russia has surrendered in the east. Either side needs to take 2 capitals. So far, the Central Powers have taken out Russia, so they only need to take 1 more capital. Let's see how this year goes. Austria begins by buying a couple of air power and a couple tanks. And they push into Venice, where there's been a lot of fighting going on. And they take out the defenders, once again making a push into Italy. That's it for their turn, actually. And we move on to Germany, who buys a little bit of infantry, a little bit more air power, and some tanks. And they push all along the front, into France in the south and Britain in the north. And as oftentimes happens on that front, it is a stalemate. They all dig in to continue the fight. And the German Navy comes out to fight. It's a huge naval battle between the British and French and the Germans. And it concludes with a German victory. The 2 German battleships have triumphed over all of the British and the French, and they even still have a submarine. The northern seas are theirs to control. They move their transports over to Holland, attacking with infantry and armor, and they defeat the few defenders there. They are now wrapped around the Entente, with a long front and a small army sticking forward in Holland. The French get infantry and armor, and they move their forces to defend Italy. They also continue the battle in the European front, reinforcing with more troops into the meat grinder, and whittling down the German forces there. On to the British, who buy 2 battleships. They've had enough of this nonsense with the German fleet. They fight the Germans in the Ruhr, and are wiped out! The German reinforcements are too much for them, and Northern Europe is now controlled by the Germans. They move up more reinforcements to try to hold off the tide, and they begin moving their forces from India, defeating the Persian forces as they go. They also move their African forces northward to stop the Ottomans who are coming at them from that direction. They place their battleships prepared for the German fleet. The Ottomans get a lot of air power. They're preparing a regular air force, and they move southward in Africa, bringing in more reinforcements behind them. And now on to Italy, who reinforces Tuscany as well as they can. And they reinforce Rome with as much infantry as they can get. The United States gets their reinforcements, and they land forces in Picardy. They are going to be sorely needed, because the British are outmatched here, while they meanwhile bring up their artillery and place their reinforcements. That ends the year, and it is really looking tough for the Entente. They had been on top, but now it looks like they're struggling in every area. In some places, it's a little bit back and forth, but the Germans are really pushing forward in areas that it counts. Where the Entente really needs to be careful is Italy, where there are not many forces between the Austrians and Rome. Speaking of which, the Austrians get some more air power so they can push quickly on their goal. They move their forces down into Tuscany and whittle down the enemy to 1 single stand. That one small group is holding out as best they can to keep the Austrians from a quick victory. The Austrians reinforce Venice, trying to get their troops to the front as quickly as possible. They place down the reinforcements in Vienna, and it's on to the Germans, who get an even number of just about everything. They push reinforcements into the Ruhr, and continue the fight along southern France. The French reinforce Lorraine, trying to get more forces into that meat grinder, and they attack Venice from Piedmont. And oh! The Austrians have a major victory over them, destroying everything except 1 unit of armor. That is a major blow to the Entente. They needed to stop the Austrians from pushing on Rome, but now there's only a skeleton force standing between them and victory for the Central Powers. New forces are placed in Paris, and we move on to the British, who get some infantry and artillery. They reinforce northern France and move back to defend British East Africa, with the only Italian force remaining in that continent. They place their reinforcements, and the Ottomans move into Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. That is a mouthful. They continue to send reinforcements down there, and they invade Persia with infantry and artillery, wiping out the British in that region. The Central Powers are on fire. It seems as though nothing will stop them. And to continue their push, the Ottomans buy 2 battleships. It's like they're not even trying to get any more land forces, they're so confident. They look to control the sea. We move on to Italy, who is desperately trying to hold on and keep the Entente in this game. They buy a lot of infantry and a little bit of artillery. They move their forces up to help in Tuscany and manage to whittle down the Austrian forces. This might just stall them as long as they need. The Italian reinforcements are placed in Rome, and we move on to the United States. The US forces move up to help the British. I mean, after all, they're all English speakers, so it'll be easier for them to call orders to one another. And the transports come back to get more reinforcements. And that is the end of the year. 1917 ends with the Entente hanging on by a thread. Italy and France together have just barely held back Austria. Britain and France, with the help of the United States, are holding back Germany and Europe. But the Ottoman Empire is dominating Africa and the Middle East. Plus, they have a major navy to be reckoned with in the Mediterranean. It's shaping up to be an exciting conclusion in 1918. You'll just have to come back to see how this all comes out. Who will break the stalemate and push through to finish off their opponent? Or will it not be concluded in the next video? Will this war drag on to 1919? We'll just have to see. Be sure to subscribe to see when the next video comes out. And happy gaming, everybody. What do you think is going to happen next? What should they do next? And what should they have done in the video that you saw? Comment your opinions below. Also support us on Patreon because beer ain't cheap. Subscribe below, thumb us and ring our bell, and find us on all our social media. See you next time!